prepping. That's a pretty hot topic now. If you do a search on YouTube or wherever, there's just tons of videos on how to prepare for a disaster. Now, to give you a little background, for me, those of you who remember the Y2K scare, that is when the fear was that all the programming that was done did not account for the change of centuries. And I've been I was a computer programmer my whole career. So I knew how valid that could be. In point of fact, during that period, I was doing contract programming, getting paid very generously because all of the major corporations were desperate for people to go through all the code and make corrections as needed. In point of fact, I was working with with nuclear power plant software, which you do want to have it work correctly. But at any rate, I was very concerned about whether or not we were going to get through all the code worldwide in time for the changeover of centuries. So that was my first foray into prepping, that is having plenty of food on hand. At that time, we lived in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Georgia, near the North Carolina line. And so we had plenty of space, adequate water forever, and remote enough that it wasn't going to likely be too trouble with trespassers. So anyway, I built a food supply of about 100 pounds of dry rice, dried vegetables. I even purchased some some native seeds. By that I mean seeds that would reproduce, and not all this crossbred stuff that's prevalent when you go buy a seed at your garden supply store. And so the world was successful in getting into the next century without any major disasters. So we ate from that pantry as much as we could, but we had other choices still. So we gave a lot of that food away to a homeless shelter that cooked for the people who stayed in the facility. So that went to good use. I also was purchasing gold coins, and an average paying about $260 an ounce for that. I held on to that for 10 years and sold it at $860. So that paid for all the effort. Although if I'd taken that amount of money and invested it in something else, I'd have had more to show for it. But at any rate, that's sort of my prepping history. And I haven't done that since 1999. But now, given where I live, which is Central Florida, and we're subject to weather that can knock out our power supplies for days or weeks, I wanted to be prepared for that, and anything else I can think of that I can afford to be prepared for. But the main thing is the lack of electricity for weeks or more. Most people don't understand that if you lose your electricity, after a week, man, nothing works. Um, the water supplies have some backup generation. Then you got sewage disposal that may or may not have any backup source of power. So when all that goes down, your water stops and your sewage backs up. So that's my biggest concern is lack of electricity. So what I've done this time, different than the other, is I want to put up, that is in storage, food that I'll actually eat. And I want to rotate that stock by eating it almost every day. So in that, I think I've learned some things. Initially, I was canning. This is bacon. The paper in there is parchment paper, which helps keep the slices separated. But that's more than I can eat in one meal. And while if I open it up, take some out and vacuum seal it, it'd probably last a little while, long enough for me to get it all eaten. But it's not I couldn't consume it in one meal. This is another example of that. These are hot Italian style sausages. Here again, more than I can eat in one meal. But here again, this is something, if I do open it and take a sausage out, I can vacuum seal it and it would last long enough for me to eat it all. This is meatballs. And I've got some mixed vegetables in there and some spices. This would be a heavy one meal for me. I live alone. My wife passed away in 2019, so I live alone. But here again, I can vacuum seal it and make it last a couple of meals, 3 meals. But this is what I'm evolving to. This is a pint jar, and it contains ground beef and pinto beans. And of course, all these meals, I would cook rice. Rice, if it's sealed against moisture, will keep virtually forever. So all these meals, I always say my meals are going to be rice and something. Well, this would be good for about 2 meals. And here again, I can vacuum seal it. Now, vacuum sealing requires electricity. The very thing I'm concerned would be lost. So I did buy some people call them battery generators, but basically they're an iron phosphate battery, an inverter, all in one unit, very automated. And it's good for about 1,500 kilowatt hours. So what I would use that for is communications, like internet, assuming it's still up and running. Some of my lighting needs. Recharge my cell phone, recharge my vacuum packing gadget, and such as that. So I would not try to run my refrigerator. Stuff that I need to freeze now, I'm typically canning, which doesn't require any refrigeration. So basically, if we had a power fail, the first thing I do is eat food out of the refrigerator. Without electricity, I wouldn't be able to, since my house is total electric, I would not be able to produce the heat necessary to run my pressure cooker, pressure canner. So I'd have to eat all that quickly, because most of that would not last more than a couple of days, if that, just vacuum packed. I might try to hot water bath some of that. But with my alcohol stove, heating up 2 or 3 gallons of water, which I would need to put the jars in, might be difficult. Although I'm stockpiling ethanol alcohol fuel, and I've bought some denatured alcohol, which is very expensive, about $23 a gallon. I can make my own ethanol alcohol much cheaper. But once the power goes off, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I'd be left with just what alcohol fuel I have on hand. So I don't know that I want to waste it trying to heat up big 3 or 4 gallons of water just to heat canned food or water canned food. So anyway, so what I'm doing is I am, as much as possible every day, eating from my canned food supply. And I do this to rotate it. I put a date on each one, and I go to the oldest first. Right now I'm working on this date, and then now, and it's now September the 13th. So I'm accumulating food faster than I'm eating it. I may slack up on that, but that's what I'm doing now. The beauty part about a mason jar is, unless you break it, it's good forever. The lids are cheap. They're about, depending on where I buy them, as low as 25 cents a piece. I got a good supply of those. But the point is, I want to turn the food. So what I'm trying to do now, instead of doing big jars of something, I'm using pint containers. And a pint container, along with rice, will generally last for 2 meals. So I can consume it all in one day. So now what I put in these things really depends on what tastes good to me. Now, one of the things I do like, thank goodness, are meatballs. Now, meatballs is one of the cheapest forms of meat that you will buy. That contains, Lord only knows what kinds of meat, but it is protein, and it tastes good. I spice it up, and so I can cook it I can either cook it over pasta or rice. And here again, it makes a good meal or two. So that's the way I'm headed. I don't want anything wasted, because there was no crisis. And thank goodness there won't be one. Back to my battery backup. I also have a 200-watt solar panel bought from the same source as the battery backup. So since I'm not going to be using the battery backup for anything that uses a lot of power, such as a refrigerator or whatever, the 200-watt solar panels should provide me with whatever I need for everything else until the power comes back on. So anyway, what prompted this video is I'm watching a lot of prepping videos, and some people are really going to the extreme. I'm hoping they don't, and we don't need it. And they're welcome to do that if it makes them comfortable. There's less constructive ways to spend money. So, but I think on a more practical vein, I'm 77 years old. So there's a limit to what, in terms of just doomsday, it would almost certainly be mine. Plus, I've got some medicines that I could do without for a while, maybe forever, whatever forever is. But my children are making their own plans, whatever they are, and I'll trust that they are preparing for the future. Okay, I think that's all I've got. This is sort of a spontaneous video, as most of mine are. No scripts, not a whole lot of planning, but just as things come to mind, it might be useful. I do want to make a video and get it posted. If you like my videos, please subscribe. Hit the like button. I would certainly appreciate that. Be safe.